Okay, and we are live. So great. I'm gonna wait probably 3 minutes or so, just kind of let people slowly funnel in, and then we will dive right into today's topic, which is the underwriting and comping masterclass. So we'll give it a couple minutes, and then we will take off over here. So in the meantime, let me just do some quick testing, just to make sure that you guys see everything here. Awesome. Awesome. I think we're all good. Awesome. We're all good. So I'll give another 2 minutes, see if anybody else wants to jump in. And then we'll be off to the races here. Okay. So I'm going to be diving right into it. And yeah, so this is probably one of my favorite topics in all of real estate. And this will be more so hyper fixating on the numbers and the math behind this business. For any of you who are in wholesaling or just doing direct to seller marketing in general, I always tell everybody that, hey, you are not in the real estate business, you are in the marketing and sales. You need to master the art of lead generation and you need to master how can I turn those leads into deals. That is what 90% of the battle is. The other 10% is kind of what we'll be diving into in this video right here. And this will be focusing on the underwriting and comping side of things. So we'll be going over a couple of different use cases, a couple of different strategies. So we'll be talking about your typical wholesale underwriting, aka we're solely just looking at comping here. But then also we'll dive into like the actual underwriting. Hey, how am I analyzing a flip? How am I analyzing a BRRRR, a Section 8 deal? And so a little bit of context on me before we dive into everything, just so that you know, hey, I am at least kind of qualified to speak on this topic. So my name is Daniel, one of the co-founders here at No Accent Callers. I've been in the real estate business for a little bit over 5 years now. And I initially started kind of in that private equity world where I would literally just stay in Excel all day long. I was working at a shop that had a little over 300 million in assets. They also did a brokerage that did a couple billion over the last decade or so. So my main role there was always on the underwriting side. And then for my own personal endeavors, I I think I've done a little bit close to 170 wholesale deals. I personally own 103 rentals. I've done a handful of flips. I've done practically every single exit strategy, whether it's the rental side or the wholesaling side. So I do sub twos, I do cash deals, I do novations. I've done flips myself. I own some Section 8s. I own some conventional rental properties. I've done a little bit in the Airbnb space. I wouldn't say it's my main expertise. So I'll a little bit touch on that. But yeah, so I'll dive kind of right into it. And for this live stream, I want it to be as authentic as possible. So I really quickly went and grabbed a handful of addresses. These three are a little bit biased. These are ones that I actually own myself. And this was a flip that I recently did. But for these two properties, these are just two leads that for my own wholesale business that I went and generated. And we'll dive into those. I'll give you the live, authentic underwriting of how I'm looking at deals. What is my philosophy? What does that process look like? And for me, I've shifted most of my wholesale business to doing the novation side of things. Reason being, dispo is way easier. Reason number two, I can get sellers more money in their pocket. And reason number three, we usually make more money on those deals. So that is a big thing that I like to focus on now in my business. But I'm just going to be showing you kind of, okay, a lead comes into your CRM. You had the conversation with the seller. You asked all the qualifying questions. You got all of the information that you needed. And now it's time to actually do your underwriting, do your due diligence on this property. So we're going to dive right into it. And again, I just grabbed a couple of addresses just to give you the authentic breakdown of how this process looks like. So there's a couple of ways that you can actually go and underwrite these things. Let's say we're going to start off with looking at the ARV versus novation price. So AKA as is. And there are really only two softwares that you need. If you want to go the free route, you can just use Zillow. And that's honestly what I prefer. I usually just use Zillow. The paid route, you can use a software like PropStream. Lucky enough, if you use no accent callers, you actually get PropStream for free. So if you didn't know that, text your CSM. They'll give you the login to that. So you don't need to pay for it. We already pay for that for you. So let's dive right into it. This is a flip that I did. As we can see, it's a nice property. I'll dive into the underwriting on this one a little bit later. But yeah, we're going to start off with this property. Again, I just went and grabbed this random property. I have not dove into it at all. So this will be fresh, as authentic as possible here. And something to note before I dive into it is understanding the difference between understanding what a non-disclosure state is. With some states, some of this information is not public, which will make your life a little bit more challenging. So let's dive into it. This is not a non-disclosure state, so we can actually see the numbers. But let's jump right in. So this is the property that we'll be looking at first. This is in a very amazing market in Raleigh, North Carolina. So usually when we're doing our prospecting, we usually don't have pictures. We're usually kind of shooting in the dark here, unfortunately, just because we've never seen the property ourselves. So make sure on that first call that you are asking all of the important questions to get insight on what the condition of this property looks like. And the biggest items you kind of want to start with those like big capital expenditures. And I'll just go back to our note sheet. What to ask on the call, to help with underwriting. And what we want to ask about is the CapEx items. So that is our roof, our HVAC, our plumbing, electric. These are like your bigger ticket items. These are the most expensive parts of a rehab, of a flip. So you want to make sure that you ask these questions. How old is the roof? What's the situation with the HVAC? When's the last time the plumbing or electric has been serviced? So these are the more expensive things. And because also when we are doing our underwriting, we need to understand what is the rehab cost? What is the scope of work with this property? Extremely important that we're asking these questions. And then now we want to get insight on the interior. So we want to ask questions about, hey, what's going on with the bedrooms, the kitchen, the living room? Or if we want to get more specifically, we can talk about, hey, how is the flooring? How about does it need new paint? Need new paint? You just want to try and ask as many questions as possible on that first call. Within my own personal team sales process, that first conversation is a 45-minute call where you're getting every single piece of information that we can need here. So to start, before we even underwrite it, make sure you get the full story. Dream scenario is, hey, you get pictures of the property, but usually that might not be the case. So you want to make sure you can ask the right questions so that you can underwrite this thing effectively. So let's look at this thing. This is a little bit helpful for us because we can see what the property actually looked like before the flip. This is some older pictures right here. Or actually, no, I lied. So let's dive into this and let's ignore the pictures. Let's just assume that we have not seen anything in regards to this property yet. So we know that, hey, let's go under the assumption. So let's start off with our first case here, which will be this deal. Assumptions, we're going to say, hey, property is dated, maybe needs 20K in cosmetic work to have 2025 finishes. So in short, it's not the prettiest, but there's no major issues. So this is the premise that we're going to go off of. Again, like hopefully we had pictures if it was a real deal, but again, I just grabbed this random lead and we're going to dive into this. So the first thing that we need to do, and unfortunately, this is what I hate about Zillow. They made a change and now it's so hard to actually find where the property is. So what I do is I usually have a split screen of Google Maps and Zillow. And just because it's hard for me to see crossroads here, I just make price like. Now I've got a clean slate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look here and I'm going to try and figure out, okay, where is this thing on Zillow? So really quick, I could see that it is right over here, I believe. This is always like the annoying part. Shout out to my guy, Eric. Eric said that if you do this on your iPad, actually, you can just click right to it. So as we see our property, I think, is this it? Let's see. We got Hay Lane, Lenore Lane. Let's see, is that us? No, we got Lenore. Hay Lane was right here. Oh no, Hay Lane's here. So we're actually a little bit off. Slide over. We're looking between Lenore and whatever I pronounce that. And what's the other crossroad? As I said, guys, this is I'm giving you the authentic experience where I struggle to find these things. So boom, there's our property. Our property is right here, as we see now. Boom. So we know that our property, let's quickly write this thing down. So let's look at our asset here. We know that our property is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, built in 1920. So beds, 3. And again, like I just like to write this stuff out. It's easy for me to visualize it. Baths, 2. I already forgot square feet. Square feet is 1,209 and built in 1920. Year builds is 1920. So now let's dive into this. So here is the biggest piece of advice that I have for everybody when you're doing novations. And again, I recommend everyone does novations. I love them. I think they're the best way to do deals. The biggest thing with novations is you want to understand that it is competition. You need to think, when I list my property, who am I competing with? If a buyer is in the market and they're looking at my home versus a home next door, I need to understand, is this house bigger than mine? Do they have more beds than me? Do they have more baths? Is it nicer finishes? So it's important that you differentiate that and know that, hey, when I'm doing an as-is novation listing, I need to know who my competition is. So let's quickly look at this thing. So we see right here, hey, this is a brand new development. Again, like we should not even compare us to that. If you looked at this and said, wow, my ARV is 1.3 million because I see this, you're an idiot. That's a new construction property. So let's go and look at the actual listed properties. So right here, we see this property is listed for 600K and it's been on the market for 35 days, 17 saves. Okay, this has had decent traction. Our property was a 3-bed, 2-bath, less square feet. So our property is a little bit smaller than this, but this property looks pretty nice. I mean, it looks like all new finishes. This is definitely nicer than our property because, again, we came in with the assumption that, hey, our property needs cosmetic work. It is dated. So we know that, hey, if I went and listed mine for 600 and I see this one is listed as a 4-bed, bigger property, nicer finishes, I cannot compete with this thing. So let's write down this property, comp number 1. And this, again, I would just give it like a quick rating, like quick notes is like nicer plus bigger. They'd beat us. I like to think this, but I like to think about a competition when I'm listing these properties. Who am I competing with? So, that right off the bat, we know that. We see this one. Hey, this one's listed for $795. Wow. Let's see how this one looks. Super nice finishes, but this thing's been listed for 250 days. Ignore that. This property, this guy has no idea what they're doing. They probably property in hopes of the best. So I like to focus on proximity firstly. So I always want to look within the closest circle possible. Now we see this one. This is a townhouse. Again, fully new finishes, built a couple of years ago. I probably would not want to compare ours to this one just because ours is a standalone single family property. Now let's zoom out a little bit more. Hey, I see this one for 640. Okay, this one is bigger than ours. Looks obviously nicer than our property. Looks like it was recently redone. Built in 2019. That is important to note because, okay, if I list my property, I guarantee you someone would rather choose this one that is bigger with an extra bathroom and it's only compared to our property, it's 100 years old. So I now know I will not beat this person right here. Nicer, bigger, newer. We're not going to compete there. So let's keep looking. As we go over here, this is a little bit further away. These are condos, ignore them. If it's easier, you can just deselect everything and only look at how. This one, 645, we already saw. And then now we see another one for 600. This property looks like it does need some work. That could be an interesting comp to look at. Built in 1920. This property is listed for 500 right here. Again, I don't think our property is nicer than this. I would think that our property, as is in its current condition, is probably in line with this one. Let's compare this to our property. Same beds. They have an extra bath. This is newer too. Remember, ours was built in 1920. So I would probably assume that, hey, if I was to go and list this property, I am not beating this one right here. This guy is going to beat me every day of the week. Again, their property is 7 years old. Mine is 100 years old. And again, when you are doing innovation, you want to be able to underwrite these things quickly. Because at the end of the day, us as investors and underwriting in general, I hope that this is a big takeaway for you guys. Everything is based off a set of assumptions. I am looking on Zillow and I'm just trying to make a sheer assumption of what I think this property is worth. As we see here, I'm seeing ranges of 380 all the way to 600 grand. For most people, they're like, Daniel, I've got no idea what I'm doing looking at this thing. Do I look at the one that is listed for 380 or do I look at the one that is listed for 600? What do I do here? When you are underwriting these deals, I try and underwrite literally within 5 minutes. I want to open this up. I want to quickly glance at it, and I'm going to go and choose, hey, I think that this is the best one to go with. So when you are doing novations or you are doing a conventional cash wholesale deal, at the end of the day, the market will decide what is the best price. I might sit here on my computer, look at Zillow, and think I know everything, but in reality, the only people I care about is buyers. What do they think when they look at these properties here? So if I was doing this, I would probably assume that, hey, this property is listed for 500 grand, built in 2018. I think I could probably list mine for like 450. Only because, hey, this one is newer. Ours is a little bit more dated. Ours has one less bathroom. I would say we could probably list for 430 to 450. And surprisingly, this estimate was pretty in line with that as well. So I would assume I can list for 430 to 450. And at the end of the day, the market will decide what makes the most sense. But something to take into consideration is that's my as is value. So in today's current state, it's probably worth it. However, I think that after doing all the repairs and maybe I add an extra bed, I think my ARV is going to be 600K. So imagine now a buyer, they can buy this thing for 400. Let's say I offered 400K to the seller. They put in 50K in work. Hey, now this thing's worth 600. That could be a very good deal. So that is how I underwrite these things very quickly. As is, if I was to list innovation, this is my number one competitor. I got to be priced lower because mine is older, mine is more dated, mine needs more work. I would think it's in the range of 430 to 450. And now for innovation, when you get it signed, the beauty is we get to leverage a real estate agent. And the beauty of using an agent is they will be the one who actually price this out for you. Again, I'm a nationwide wholesaler. I live in Chicago. I've actually never done a deal in Chicago. Everything I've done is nationwide. So I do not know the market as well as that agent. They live, die, and breathe in that market. They know it better than us. So the beauty is, hey, we lock it in contract. I go to the agent. I say, hey, agent, I've got this address right here. Here's its current condition. What do you think we could list it for? And then boom, right, like just like that, we can kind of really quickly see, okay, does this make sense? And now let's kind of underwrite from an MAO. So if I know that I can list it for, and as you saw, it's like how I look at these things is I just want to really quickly glance at it. I want to quickly see this deal within 5 minutes. I want to give it a price because I don't want to waste my time comping a deal this long just to present it and the seller be like, Daniel, I wanted 600 grand. What are you saying? So that's why it's important. You want to be quick. You want to be able to analyze these deals as fast as you can. So that now when you go and pitch it, hopefully the price worked. But if not, you didn't waste all your time underwriting a deal that did not make sense. So let's say we go and list this thing for $430,000. Now, how much money are we going to make? So let's say we listed it for 430 and our under contract price for innovation is, let's say I got under contract for 350 grand. Let's run the numbers on what this looks like. So we're going to go and list price 430. And something that I always tell people is assume you're not going to get that price. Let's say I listed it for 430. I might need to do like a 15 grand reduction over the course of a week or so. So my actual net sale price, my actual gross sale price, is going to be 415. Let's say I negotiate, maybe to give seller credits, maybe the buyer wanted something else. Okay, we get it for 415. Now I got to pay my agent. Usually this is anywhere like the range of 3 to 6%. I usually get mine for 5%. So I'm going to pay my agent 5%. Closing costs, let's say, again, I want to be conservative. Let's say 2% in closing costs. And let's say I had to put in capital of like 2 grand. Maybe I did some rehab myself. Maybe I went and got cleaners. Maybe I got pictures of it. So now my net proceeds at the sale is at 415 list price. I got to pay my agent. I got to pay closing costs, and I tied in some other capital. So I net 383 grand. And as we know, I'm under contract for 350, and my net profit here, aka my wholesale fee, I made 33 grand on this property. So that is really it. That is how we look at these novation deals. Again, we are thinking, and the biggest takeaway right here is, where is this thing? Asset competition. That is a huge takeaway that I hope people leave this with, is when you are doing a novation or you are doing a cash deal, you need to know who you are competing with. And now let's go and look at, compared to a cash deal, how would this work? So this property is, again, same year build as us, a little bit bigger than us. I would say they're probably overpriced a little bit. I think ARV here will probably get less than 600 because, again, ours is smaller. Ours has one less bed, and I think they're overpriced. So they're probably going to end up having to sell for, call it 580. Let's say our ARV is 550, right? So we saw that our ARV is $550,000. Now I'm going to be diving into like the underwriting of the cash deal, right? So let's say we got it under contract. ARV is 550. It might even, let's say we got it under contract this time for 350 grand. And again, like I'm just throwing numbers out here so we can get some reps and underwrite these things fast. So let's say we got under contract for 350 and ARV is 550. But let's be conservative and let's say, hey, this thing will actually list for 520, sell for 520. Now let's kind of dive into the underwriting if I was the buyer. And again, the biggest thing here that I want you to understand when you're underwriting is you need to be thinking of your end user in sight. You need to know that, hey, there's going to be someone on the other side who is buying this deal that needs to make money themselves too. So let's say I got under contract for 350 and my wholesale fee was 20 grand. A buyer price here is the 350 under contract plus my fee, 370K. Now, this is huge. I want you to always put on the hat of the buyer because that is who you are pushing these deals to. You need to understand how they think and how they operate. So if I was a buyer, my purchase price is 370. I've got closing costs of 2%. So my cost to buy in total is $377,000. That is what I buy this property for. And let's say my rehab on the property is 40 grand. Now here's something to consider. Okay, so my total cash needed on this project, my cost basis, is 417 grand. That is how much capital, as me as a flipper, I need to bring to the table. And unfortunately, most guys usually do not have 417 grand liquid for a project. So what they're going to do is one of two options. Either one, a hard money lender, two, a private money lender, or three, a private money partner. So what are the differences between these three? Hard money lender is usually like more of like an institutional level person where you're going to go to like probably their website and fill out a form saying, hey, I want to go and buy this project. Here's my cost for it. And how the hard money lender looks at it is what they typically do is a loan to cost. And what that means is they're going to give you a loan based on the total cost basis of the project. So it's going to be an LTC of usually 90%. So what that means is they're going to actually lend 90% of our cost. So let's say I got a hard money lender. My total loan they're going to give me is 375. My equity, so the cash I need to bring, because they want you to bring capital to the table. They want you to have some risk. I got to bring 41K to the table. Now let's break down this loan, right? 375K. But here's the challenge. These hard money lenders, they're dicks. They're going to charge you crazy fees. I just bought a 6-door portfolio, And if you saw the amount of fees that I had to pay, you would throw up. So let's dive into what are those fees. Number one is points. So what this means is they're going to say, hey, we're going to loan you 375 grand, Daniel, but we're going to charge you 2 points. And 2 points just means 2%. AKA, they're going to take 2% of your loan, and that's their points they're going to charge you. But there's also other lending closing costs. They have an underwriting fee. They have an appraisal fee. They have all these egregious costs that just eat at you, which is probably another 1%. So in total, like I got to pay fees of about 11.2K, and my equity contribution is this. Now let's break down this loan even further. So my loan was 375K. Usually right now, interest rates are probably 12% for hard money, maybe 13%. However, this project in months is only going to be 6. So over the course of this loan, my total interest paid for this project is, I'm going to take my loan amount and I'm going to take that 13%. I'm only doing it for 6 months. So I'm going to go and take the interest rate, and I'm going to multiply it times 6 over 12, and it's 24.4K. So essentially, like in aggregate, what kind of interest I'm paying is more like, what is that? Oops. In reality, it's actually like, hey, I'm paying 6.5% interest for 6 months straight. So that's kind of what those lending costs are going to look like. So now let's go back to our underwriting of this deal. So, hey, I bought it for my cost to buy was $377, and I had to pay all these other fees. So let's dive into those fees. I had to pay for, my cost basis is $417. I paid fees of, as we saw, 11.2K. I had to pay interest of 24.4 grand. So my total project costs of this deal is adding up all of these figures here. And so we saw that in total, I had to bring 453K. Let's break that down again. The 417 is I bought it for 370. I paid 2% in closing costs. My cost to buy was now 377. I had to rehab this thing for 40 grand. So my cost basis on the project is 417,000. So now I go to a hard money lender or a PML or a PMP, and they're going to say, hey, Daniel, I'll go and loan you 90% of that cost. Okay, that got us to this 375. But Daniel, you're going to get charged with some crazy fees. So I got hit with 2% points, and I got hit with 1% in just loan closing costs. So in total, that got me to that 11K right here. And the lender, they want their money too. They're going to charge me for a 6-month project, a total of 6.5%. Annualized, that's 13%. So I got to also pay 24K in interest. So that gets us to our total project cost basis right here. Now let's look, hey, am I going to be profitable on this thing? So my ARV here was 520. As we know, I got to go and pay, let's say reductions. Maybe I have to sell for like 10 grand less. So I actually sell it for 520 minus 10 grand. I sell it for 510. Now I got to pay agent comms of, as we know, 5%. I got to pay closing cost of probably 2%. And so my net proceeds at the sale is 474 grand, aka my profit on this deal is only going to be 20 grand. So what we're saying is, hey, if they mess up at all, let's say, for example, they thought it was 40 grand in rehab, but what if it gets to 50K? As we see, they're only going to profit. And I'll just show you as we can change up some of these numbers to see how things work, how things operate. So what if the rehab, we thought it was 40 grand, and what if it's 55 grand? We're going to only make 5 grand on this deal on a 6-month project with all this time, with all this capital risk? No, of course not. So now let's look at these other things. Hey, what if this lender now says to me, you know what, Daniel, I'm charging you 14%. And what if I thought the project was only going to take 6 months, but it actually took 12 months? I'm going to lose money. So there's virtually no room for error to only make 19K. Usually what these flippers want to make, and again, this will be the key right here, 10% of the cost basis is usually the return they want. And again, people all have their own metrics. At the end of the day, the buyer will tell you what they're looking for. But back of napkin, you're going to say, hey, our total cost is 450. I want to make 45 grand. So we see that, hey, we're only projecting 19K profit. How can I get this flipper to 45K profit? So I locked this thing in for 350K. But I think what we're realizing is I locked it in for too much money. What if instead I locked it in for 300? Now the person's at a 74K profit. Okay, that's an amazing deal. Maybe you don't need to get that big of a reduction. How about 320? Can we hit that? They want to make 42, and we're seeing he's projected to make 52K now. So now I know that, hey, if I lock it in at 320, I can definitely make my 20K wholesale fee. Because I know this guy only wants to make 42K, but hey, it looks like he's going to make 52 instead. So that is how we underwrite these deals. You want to have the lens of the buyer. If you wanted to do your quick and dirty underwriting, you can do, okay, I'm going to take ARV times 0.75 minus rehab minus my fee. Yes, you can do that. That is what all these gurus will tell you. But at the end of the day, if you go and show that to a buyer and say, oh, no, this was my underwriting, they're going to call you an idiot. You need to understand the numbers behind this. And you need to know how the buyers are thinking. How is a flipper going to analyze this deal? And this is exactly what they're going to do. They're going to run you through this. Okay, I buy it for 340. I've got closing costs. I've got rehab. Okay, now I've got to have all of my hard money lending fees because no one's going to go and donate me money for free. And that is what that whole process looks like to actually go and underwrite this thing and see how profitable is this. So yeah, that's really it. In terms of actually underwriting for a flip, we want to take into consideration all of these costs that we have versus when we're doing a novation. That's the quick and dirty. Let's see who our competition is. Who are we competing with when we are listing it? And that's really it from the underwriting side of things. And again, option number 2 is, let me go and grab this address. So this is the free way you want to use PropStream. Let's just run through that. Hopefully I'm logged in and I can show you guys this. Again, text your CSM, you'll get this for free. I know there's on here. So you're lucky. You're about to save $100 a month now. Let's go and look. PropStream is nice because it can tell you, they think ARV is 500 on this, pretty in line with what we thought. We can see, that's not accurate. But what's cool is that the comps, we can go and see everything. So as you saw, I was only looking at for sale comps. Something that I neglected to show was actually sold comps. So if you're doing your sold comps, you'll want to look, okay, it's sold within the last 6 months and it's within a close proximity to us. And again, pretty in line with what we were seeing. Hey, ARV, okay, that one was for 600. This ARV, 505, 540. So pretty in line with what we were seeing of, hey, in the range of that 480 to 550. So on PropStream as well, you can go and quickly filter. And what you do on PropStream, make sure you do this, change your date range. For some reason, they like to give you a 1 year. I always default to doing a 6-month timeline. And then you want to sort it by distance. So I want to see the closest proximity properties and make sure it is somewhat similar to mine. So, hey, damn, this one listed for 757. Wow, that is crazy. I do not know how they achieved that. But yeah, you can go through and I can see all other sold properties. I can actually see the pictures of it. This is another really good resource that can help you with seeing some comps and do this really quick. So at the end of the day with underwriting, speed is key. You only want to build a deep dive underwriting if you are buying the deal yourself, or maybe once you have it in contract, but don't waste your time over analyzing this stuff. Because, hey, I might pitch it and that might be extremely far off from what the buyer was looking for. So that's what the seller was looking for. That's why it's important to move fast. Do not waste your time over analyzing these things, because you saw this. I was just making educated guesses. That is all underwriting is. Underwriting is projecting profit based off of a set of assumptions. An assumption is an educated guess. I am just guessing here. That is what underwriting is. It is literally, I am building a model off a set of assumptions in hopes of trying to determine what is the anticipated profit of this deal. And that is a huge thing that people don't really take into consideration. So you want to be quick with it. At the end of the day, the buyer will tell you what price makes sense. Do not overanalyze this and take too long to actually pitch the seller. So that is my underwriting spiel on actually looking at a flip, looking at a cash deal, looking at a wholesale deal, looking at a novation. And for context, just so you know that, hey, I somewhat know what I'm talking about. This was a flip project that we did. Um, as we see, I bought this thing for 264. 2 months later, I went and listed this for 450K. And this was like a 100K profit deal. I bought it for 264. I put in about 40K in work, listed it for 450, and we ended up achieving 445, I think, and made a nice six-figure profit on that deal. And it really came down just to the actual underwriting side of things. So that's really it from a cash deal or innovation or a wholesale. It is pretty simple. Do not overthink it. A lot of people like to overanalyze a lot of these deals here. That is what this process looks like. And now I'm going to quickly run through, because I only got like 20 more minutes left, actually running through how you are looking at rental properties. So if you're not interested in buying rental properties, I wouldn't watch this part. But if you are, let's dive into this. And also, it's important to know if you get a turnkey deal, like how do you look at this thing? How do you analyze this? So I'm going to run through this really quick. Just getting all of our resources on one page. So we'll talk about all of this stuff in this breakdown here. So let's dive into underwriting. How are we analyzing deals? And there's a couple of deals that we can underwrite for. So we're going to go over the following use cases here. We're going to go over a cash Section 8 DSCR loan. This is what every guru loves to talk about is, let's go and buy a Section 8 property, the DSCR loan. Conventional LTR underwriting with DSCR loans. And then we'll also talk about seller finance deals. And then I'll take a stab at Airbnbs. So really quick, I'll just show you guys how to analyze an Airbnb. There's this amazing software. Again, like I'm not promoting them. Like I don't have an affiliate code or anything. It's a software called AirDNA. It is extremely powerful. I'll show you how it works. So this is a duplex that I own in Milwaukee. Let's go and see it. This is one of my properties right here. It's not too bad, right? I think it's solid. I put some more work into it though. But let's run through like how to use Airbnb if you are underwriting for that exit strategy. I actually realized I might not have an account that works. So let's see. But it's super cool. All you do is copy your address into here, and it literally tells you everything, saying, hey, if you were to go and list this on Airbnb, your projected revenue is 66K per year, which their confidence score is low. So, okay, we might want to take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's kind of how these Airbnbs work if you are wanting to invest in Airbnb. And one of the biggest pros to it is you can make more expensive assets pencil, and it's better for W-2 owners, W-2ers who want to write off some of their taxes with their Airbnbs. So Airbnb is pretty cool, but my personal favorite, we are going to be talking about looking at Section 8 deals. And I'm going to be running you through a case right now, and this will be a BRRRR strategy, one of my favorites. So let's run through this deal with Daniel here. Let's look at it. We got all the live numbers here. Again, we don't lie here. As we saw, it was listed for $1,400. So I bought it in 2023 for $115K. So DK bought it for $115K. My closing costs were about 2% because I paid for both sides. So, and I also did an inspection, which cost me $400. So my cost to buy was all of those numbers, $117K. So now what I did is I got a PML. So what the PML did is they went and lended me money for 6 months. So PML term was 6 months, and the interest rate was just a flat 5%. So if you wanted to say annualized, it was 10%. Okay. They didn't charge me any fees. Again, this was somebody in my network who was just like, Daniel, I need to put cash somewhere. So in total, we bought it for $117. My rehab was about 20 grand. So my total cost basis for the project was this sum of 117 and 20. And so my total cost was 137. And I had to go and pay a PML 5% interest, whatever, not too bad. So total was this 144. I went after 6 months. Okay, we did all that. We had it rented. We also rented it during this process. So, but we'll just talk about this refi really quickly. Or actually, yeah, we'll do the refi first. So the ARV for this property was about 165 grand. nothing too crazy. It wasn't a massive value add. So what we did, and this is a duplex for context. That's why it's a higher ARV in Milwaukee. So I went to a DSCR lender and said, hey, lender, I want to do a cash out refinance. Here's the property. Here's what it's currently renting for. Here's everything. What this says, okay, Daniel, that looks good. We'll give you a 75% loan, meaning they're going to take the value times 75%, and that was how much they were lending me. So the loan was for about 123 grand, but they also charged me some points. So my equity portion. So let's call this just the capital stack right here. That's my capital stack, actually. And don't forget, the lenders, they wanted to charge their points, which is only 1%, so not too bad. Then they also had some closing costs, like loan closing costs. So in total fees was this. And so my equity in total that I had to leave in the deal was this. Okay, right? But that's not as important, so I'll delete that. So now, most importantly, my PML. So my PML, they gave me how much money? They gave me what? What was it? They gave me 137 because they funded the whole thing. Sorry, couldn't find that. PML gave me, and they charged me some interest of 6K. So they're owed at the sale about 144. But I only got a loan for 123. So DK had to write a check for the difference. So, okay. The loan gave them 123K. I had to front them 20. So that's my equity contribution. So my cash in the deal was now this. This was our cash in the deal. Now let's dive into the underwriting. So I'll kind of hit off on two things, the Section 8 as well as just the conventional rentals. So we know that, okay, Daniel, let's talk about the stabilized deal. So stabilized, we know that, hey, Daniel, ARV on this thing was, what was it? Where is it? 165. My loan amount was 123. My cash in deal was 20K. And my equity is the difference between all of these. So I made 20K in equity too, which is awesome. Nice little value add play. And let's look at these loan terms, right? Always fun. So the loan terms for this deal was interest rate of 6.5%. Again, this was like in 23. Amortization was 30, and this is years. Again, if you're underwriting it, always have it as 30. That is typically what you will always see. And my loan amount, as we know here, was this. So my monthly payment was $782. So this is what it looked like upon stabilized. This is our initial stuff right here that we are looking at. So this is the overview of the deal. Now let's look at deal overview at refi. Now we're going to go and do an underwriting on the property. Let's dive into it. So let's talk underwriting. So our address here was this. Now let's talk about two strategies. We got LTR and Section 8. Again, I would talk about Airbnbs, but I don't own any. I don't want to lie to you guys and think I know how to do it. So let's look at how to underwrite these things. There's one software for LTRs, which is going to be Rentometer. It's like $10 a month. You should probably buy it. It's not that expensive. And remember though, sorry, I didn't mention this. This was a duplex, right? So this is a duplex. Unit 1 was a 3-bed, 1-bath. Unit 2 was also a 3-bed, 1-bath. So when I go on this, sorry, on Rentometer, I'm going to want to look for a 3-bed property that's probably in the last 6 months or so. I want to do a radius like within a mile, and I'm only looking at apartments because they don't have a whole house. So we saw, hey, this thing's going to rent for $1,100 a month. Boom. So we know our LTR, I could get $1,100, but remember it's 2 units, so I can get $2,200. However, my strategy has always been Section 8. So I'll show you how it works with Section 8. You'll want to search up this HUD FMR. And again, I've paid so many Section 8 gurus. Like, this is literally, I'm going to expose them all with showing you how all this stuff works here. So you're going to go in HUD FMR. You're going to go to 2026, or we're in 2025. Let's not do that. And you're going to go to this thing called Access to Small Area FMRs. You're going to click that link. And then now you're going to hit 2025, look up, and you're going to find your state. So mine, our case at hand is Wisconsin. That's West Virginia. And I was in Milwaukee. So this is Milwaukee County. Then now I got to figure out, okay, what was this zip code? Oops. Zip code 53208. Boom. Now we're going to go here and type in my zip code. So we see that a 3-bedroom is going to rent for $1,400. And I got 2 of those things. So my Section 8 is actually going to rent for an extra $600, and it's guaranteed by the government. It's a no-brainer in my opinion. However, again, this is what the Section 8 gurus are not going to tell you. Though the website told me, Daniel, you're going to get $1,400. I don't get $1,400. So there's a term called loss to lease, which essentially means we're just discounting the projected rent versus what I will actually get. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my Section 8 rent, and I'm going to multiply it by like 93%. That is what I think that I will actually get. Yes, hopefully I do get 2,800, and I will be stoked if I do. But I always want to play things conservatively. And I want to always underwrite what is my worst case scenario. If you are planning on buying rentals or you want to understand how an investor thinks, you want to underwrite these deals thinking, what is my worst case scenario? Am I happy with that? If you are happy with that, anything on top is gravy. So I probably think that I'm only going to get $2,600 effectively for this. I may get 2,800, but I don't want to be upset. I want to know what is my worst case scenario here. And let's talk about what this cash flow underwriting looks like. Because people tend to not understand how to underwrite these deals. So we'll run through the cash flow here. So in total, we'll look at monthly here. We know that my rent is going to be $2,800, but let's call a reduction loss to lease of that times -7%. And our net rent is boom. What is it? Or if people want to call it like EGI. Okay. Effective gross income, effective gross income. And what we want to account for is vacancy. People don't realize that, hey, there's going to be a time where your property goes vacant. So you're going to want to allocate probably like 7% or maybe 6% for vacancy. A good range here is usually in the range of like 3 to 10%. So I want to be conservative. I'm going to say 6% here. So 6% goes to vacancy. And then I've got my property manager where I'm going to have to pay them like, or actually, rent. No, this is our EGI. Hopefully my old professor doesn't see that. So I know that, hey, I'm going to actually get $2,447 here. Now let's look at our operating expenses because, hey, it's not free to run these things. I've got my property manager who pays 10%. I've got repairs, which are usually probably 10%. I've got taxes, and then I've got insurance. So you want to actually figure out what your taxes and insurance are. I own this property, so I know what it actually is here. So our insurance for this property is about $130 a month. And I think my taxes for the year are like $2,000 maybe. So $166. My repairs, you're going to take that times 10%. And luckily you have a calculator for this. So we provided that for you guys. Just shoot your CSM a message and they'll be able to get you this calculator. So let's go and get back to this. Property manager is going to run me for 10% as well. And then the beauty with Section 8 as well is they pay the utilities. So our total expenses are this. Just want to think, did I miss anything in particular? I'm going to just call, we got lawn care, lawn/snow, which might run me for another $100. This is Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, unfortunately, it snows. So in total, we see our total expenses at $886, which gets us to about a 36% expense ratio. So the good rule of thumb that I always tell people, and I'm going to add an other for this reason. let's see. So here's what I tell people is you want your total expenses to be in the range of 40 to 50%. So what I mean is you want to take your rent times 40 to 50%, and that is your cash flow before financing. So that's what I tell the good rule of thumb for everybody. So this is what our NOI is. So we're going to take our EGI plus our total expenses. Now we see, hey, we're going to get about $1460 before our debt. Now, of course, and again, this is in line about 40%. If I want to be ultra conservative, I could get it to, 44%. So I'm going to get 1361 in net operating income. But now I got to pay the bank. They're not going to give me this thing for free. So let's go and take our monthly payment. And now we can see what our net cash flow is. So boom, we now see that, hey, I'm going to cash flow about $579 on this deal. Now let's look at our kind of metrics. So my cash on cash is, I'm going to annualize this. If I want to just annualize everything over here, I could just do all that times 12, but it doesn't matter. So my cash on cash is I'm going to take my rents, I'm going to annualize it, my cash flow, divided by my cash tied in the deal. So we see, hey, I'm going to get a 33% cash on cash return. And this is worst case scenario. This is like doomsday. My operating expenses make sense. My rent is reasonable. I'm allocating for a decent amount of vacancy. Even if it gets to 10% vacancy, I'm at a 28% cash on cash return. Even if my repair costs double, I'm at a 15% cash on cash return. And those are all things that I'm happy with. Like I would not be upset about that kind of yield. But also, most importantly, I'm looking at a BRRRR. So how we look at BRRRRs is I want to see, okay, I'm going to cash flow this much per year, but I also made 20K in forced equity from the rehab that I did. And I'm going to divide that by my total cost capital in the deal. So we see, hey, I'm going to get an ROI of 126%, and my cash on cash return is a whopping 28%. So these are all metrics that I am personally ecstatic about, and these would be literally dream scenario for individuals. That is how you want to underwrite these deals. And when you're looking at this, if you want quick and dirty, this is how I can underwrite a deal in 30 seconds. How to underwrite a deal in 30 seconds. You're going to find the rent, or how to underwrite cash flow. So find the rent. Let's say it's $2,000 a month. I'm going to say OpEx is 40%. So take my rent times 40%. That's my expenses. Cash flow before financing is boom, $1,200. Really quick. And then look at my cap rate. Let's say the purchase price was 180 grand. My cap rate is an 8 cap. So if you wanted to quickly underwrite a deal, like in 1 second, just take your rent times 0.6, and that is your cash flow before financing. If you get a deal and you want to underwrite it in literally 1 second, take your rent times 0.6. That's your rent after expenses. That is what your cash flow will look like. Super simple. That is how you underwrite a deal in literally 1 second. If you want to get more tactical, again, the biggest takeaway that you should have here is your operating expenses. This should be anywhere from 40 to 50%. If you are under 40%, you are lying to yourself. You are going to lose money. It's that simple. I see so many people in these Facebook groups lose their ass because they do not understand this one principle here. And now something else to take into consideration that I didn't do in the ROI is a very important metric called equity paydown. So I want to look at how much of my loan I am paying down. So after 5 years, let's do it after 1 year, like within the first year. I'll show you how to do this computation. It's a hard computation. You're gonna take your rate right here, divided by 12, number of periods. We're gonna be doing 12 months of payments, or let's say I want to see what my loan is after 3 years. So 36 months. We know our monthly payment is $782, and we know that our current loan is $123. Whoa, I messed that up. Rate over 12. Payment amount. Oh no. Oh, I'm looking at future value. Okay. So let's go and do the future value computation. Did I do that right? Let's see. Yeah. So let's look at future value after 3 years. Future value, I'm going to take my rate divided by 12, and periods, it's 12 times 3 is 36. My payment amount is this. and my loan amount is 123. So now add that, boom. I see, hey, also a beauty of this deal is, hey, within 3 years, I paid down, let's look at 1 year if we're looking at year one returns. In 1 year, I paid down how much in equity? 1.3K. So on just equity pay down, these are all the metrics you got to think. Just on paying down my equity, paying down my loan, I got an extra 6.6 yield. Now let's also look at appreciation. Hopefully my asset appreciates by like 2% a year. So let's look at our total ARV times 2%. That's 3.3 grand. And again, let's divide that by our equity, our capital in the deal. So people don't even take this into consideration. I just uncovered another 21% year over year yields. Let's say 1% appreciation. So I just uncovered an extra 14.56% yield by looking at these other metrics as well. So make sure that, hey, I see my cash on cash is good. I see I made a decent return on the burr I did. But hey, I'm also going to get a 15% yield on my capital just by paying down that loan and my asset appreciating. So I hope that kind of with this breakdown, some of the biggest takeaways that you guys have are these three biggest things here. When you are wholesaling, you need to be thinking like the buyer. You need to put that lens on and know who is your end user that is going to be buying this asset. And you need to think from their perspective. How are they going to analyze this deal? How are they going to underwrite this property? You need to wear that hat. And that is kind of what we broke down within this sheet over here of, hey, how is an investor going to look at this? This is the underwriting they are going to run through. I'm going to buy it for this. This is my cost basis. I'm going to go and get debt at 10% net of everything. After I sell it with my agent, what is my net proceeds? What is my net profit? Okay, is that in line with the 10% of my cost basis? It is. Great. Boom. It's a deal. You want to think like them because at the end of the day, if you push a shitty deal to a buyer, they are going to laugh in your face and say, Daniel, never send me a deal again. You have no idea what you are doing. I see so many people waste their time locking in deals because they don't know how to think like an investor. They don't know how to underwrite these deals. So the last thing you want to do is waste your time or waste that owner's time as well, locking in a contract that you know you can't perform on because you don't know the underwriting. You are going to lose every relationship with buyers or with other wholesalers or with the seller if you do not know the math. You just need to understand these numbers when you're looking at it. Another thing with novations is you just want to be thinking about your competition. Because you are listing the property on the market, you want to know, hey, if a buyer is looking at these properties, they are competing to either buy my property or property B. And I need to price accordingly. Think about your competition, know who you are competing with, and that will allow you to help price your property. And the last thing with the underwriting strategy that I have over here, my number one philosophy is underwrite your doomsday scenario. Understand what is that worst case. And if I want to look at best case scenario, right, and I deleted my loss to lease, I said, hey, my vacancy is me fucking 4%. My repairs are not going to be that bad. Hey, there's a chance I can get a 47% cash on cash return. But there's also a good chance I don't. However, you know what? I'm pretty happy with a 28% yield. That is my doomsday scenario. Let's say, hey, maybe I only rent it for $2,100. I'm still going to get a 19% cash on cash return. Know what your risks are. When you are underwriting, you should never be looking and glamorizing the upside. You should always be underwriting for worst case scenario. What is my doomsday situation? What is the worst possible outcome? And am I happy with that? Like, for example, when I was underwriting this flip that I did here, and again, I made 100 grand profit on it, but I was underwriting it where, hey, I knew my worst case doomsday scenario, everything goes wrong, I still made 60 grand. And I had a big enough margin of error. And the beauty of wholesaling and being in this business and bringing your lead generation in-house is you have that control. And if you can get a deal for good enough where, hey, you can make every single mistake in the book and still hit your desired yield, that is how you need to be thinking about these deals. Is what is your worst case scenario? Are you happy with that? And anything above it is just gravy. It's just even better. So the biggest thing you should be underwriting, what is the doomsday? What is the worst case scenario? And that is what you should be following. So I hope this was helpful. I know I could kind of ramble and go on some tangents about this. I didn't really present anything too particular. I wanted to give you that authentic underwriting. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. And again, like the biggest takeaways for you guys should be think like a buyer, wear that hat when you are underwriting these deals, If you are doing innovation, understand what your competition is. Who are you competing with if you were to list this property? Then lastly, analyze your risks. Underwrite what is my worst case scenario and am I happy with it? Anything above it is gravy, right? Like, yeah, if I can get a 40% yield, I'll be stoked. But am I okay with only getting 5%? And if I'm not, then I won't do the deal. Just always look at what is my worst case scenario. Then again, upside is gravy. That's even better. So again, I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message directly. I'll pull up my Twitter if anyone wants to DM me over there. That's where most of my stuff is. I'm gonna give myself a quick shameless plug on my Twitter. Actually, I don't know if I can pull it up. But yeah, if you want, go on my Twitter. It's Daniel Kaplan RE. Shoot me a DM. I also make a lot of posts doing like way deeper dives into some of these underwritings, how I look at deals, what my philosophy is. But again, I hope this is helpful. I hope you got some value out of it. And again, the three biggest takeaways that I hope you leave with this is when you are underwriting, to think like a buyer. If you are doing innovation, to understand who am I competing with, what other assets are there on the market. The number three is underwrite your doomsday scenario. What is the worst case? Am I happy with it? And anything above it is just gravy. Only analyze the risks. Do not make a deal look better than it actually is, and you will not lose money. I see way too many people lose money because they always underwrite at the top of the market rents with the least possible expenses, and that is how you lose your ass. So I hope this is of value, and hope you guys wish you guys the best of luck in underwriting your deals and keep crushing it.